Thank you for joining us for this Holy Week service. Often there's an aversion to this week because people find it to be a little too dark, a little too heavy. But as we are experiencing and living every day, sometimes the world is dark and heavy. This Holy Week lets us see Jesus and God's divine response to the world when it is that way. So what happens on Holy Week? Palm Sunday, we find people filled with expectation and hope, and then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Jesus is busy teaching, offering prophetic witness, and building relationship. On Thursday, Jesus shares communion and washes the feet of his disciples. And on Friday, he experiences abandonment, failure, and death, which leaves Saturday as an uncertain and painful day of waiting. We at Highlands United Methodist Church connect with that energy and hope, and we use that to drive the teaching, the witness, the relationship, living like we see Jesus do. That's what we do here. But what happens when we encounter hatred, anger, failure, division, warring madness, isolation, fear, and all the other darknesses the world can bring? For me, the answer to those situations is offered to us on Thursday. Maundy Thursday is the name for today. It comes from the Latin word meaning mandate or commandment. Today is named for the commandment Jesus gave his disciples. As he washed their feet, offering humble service to the world, he said these words, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you." Those are the words. That is the sentiment. That is the crux of everything. We might ask, why did Jesus come to live with us, to come live like us? The answer is, love one another as I have loved you. Yes, but why did he teach and preach? Why did he challenge all the authorities and push back on all the boundaries? Why did he do those things? Love one another as I have loved you, he says. So why did he break bread and share the cup? Why did he suffer? Why did he die? Love one another as I have loved you. Why do we gather all these years later, even when we can't be in the same space, putting in the effort to connect in this moment? Why do we do it? Love one another as I have loved you. This evening, we are seeking to connect to one another, to the story, and to the very divine presence made real in Jesus all those years ago that is with us in this moment. This evening, you will experience the story of Thursday and Friday, the washing of the feet, the breaking of the bread, the falling away of the disciples. Join us as we share in the story.
Christ is the light of the world. As we observe the lighted candle, let us remember these words from the Gospel of John. The true light that enlightened every person was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him.
Many people chose to pursue this light. The Bible tells us Jesus called 12 apostles as well as others. Jesus speaks to them saying, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but on a stand, and it gives light to all the house. Let your light so shine before others, that they may see your good works and give glory to your Creator in heaven."
Jesus calls Peter to be a disciple. He also calls his brother Andrew. As Jesus walks by the Sea of Galilee, he sees two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they are fishermen. And he says to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Immediately they leave their nets and follow.
Then Jesus calls James to be a disciple. He also calls his brother John. And going from there, he saw two brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and John in the boat with their father, mending their nets. And he called them. Immediately they left the boat and followed him.
Jesus calls Thomas to be his disciple.
Jesus calls Matthew to be a disciple.
He also calls Judas Iscariot. Jesus calls Philip.
Jesus calls Simon the Zealot. Jesus calls James the younger, the son of Alphaeus.
Bartholomew,
And Thaddeus.
Come to the table of grace. Come to the table of grace. This is God's table, it's not yours or mine. Come to the table of grace. Come to the table of peace. Come to the table of peace. This is God's table, it's not yours or mine. Come to the table of peace. Come to the table of love. Come to the table of love. This is God's table, it's not yours or mine. Come to the table of love. Come to the table of joy. Come to the table of joy. This is God's table, it's not yours or mine. Come to the table of joy. Come to the table of grace. It's an interesting thing when we actually can't come to the same table together. But we can come and be present to the story together. In this in-between time, between when we were last able to be at the table together and when we will be at the table physically together again, we are still called to hear the story. In fact, that was Jesus' key request. He said, "Do this in remembrance of me." The act of communion is to be in communion with God, also to be in communion with one another. And I look forward to when we will be in one's physical communion once again. But this evening, I invite you to hear the story, to remember the power in it, and to remember God's love. Jesus and his disciples had gathered at the table. They were in the midst of sharing the meal, a meal built around remembering the Seder they gathered together for was to remember the story of God's faithfulness, how God had met people in the wilderness and uncertainty and journeyed with them and brought them to a better time and a place. That resounds in a new way with me. And they sat at the table, and Jesus took the bread, and he broke it. And he said, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And likewise, after the meal, he took the cup, and he blessed it, and he said, "This is my life and my love poured out for you and for many. Be reminded that there is nothing that can separate you from the love of God." This meal for all of its mystery, for all of its symbolism, is so simple. It is what sustains us. It is bread, it is cup, it is the day-to-day existence that we are offered. And in that simple, everyday nature, Jesus says, amidst your brokenness, you will be whole, and nothing separates you from the love of God. This is a message for us, spoken so many years ago, remembered moment after moment after moment at tables the world over. I invite you at your table, the next time you sit down with the simplest of foods, to remember God's love for you. And remember, this is a table of grace and peace and love and joy. Come to the table. As you go to your table, invite the presence to be with you, that we might turn to God and look at our table and say, come to my table. Make it one of grace.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever.
It is just before the Passover feast. Having loved his friends, he now shows them the full extent of his love. The evening meal is being served, and Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, is plotting to betray Jesus. Jesus gets up from the meal, takes off his outer clothes, and wraps a towel around his waist. After that, he pours water into a basin and begins to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that is wrapped around him.
He comes to Simon Peter, who says to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replies, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," Peter says, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answers, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me."
When he has finished washing their feet, he puts on his clothes and returns to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You can call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done.
My children, I shall not be with you very much longer. And now I give you a new commandment. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. If you have love for one another, then everyone will know you are my disciples.
Jesus goes with his disciples across the Kidron Valley, where there is a garden. Now Judas, who betrays him, also knows of this place, for Jesus often met there with his friends. So Judas, procuring a band of soldiers from the high priests, goes there with lanterns and torches and weapons.
Then Jesus comes forward and says to them, "Whom do you seek?" Judas is standing with them. They say, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answers, "I am he."
Then Simon Peter, having a sword, draws it and strikes the high priest's slave, cutting off his right ear.
Jesus says to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink of the cup which God has given me?" So the soldiers seize Jesus, bind him, and lead him to the high priest. Simon Peter follows Jesus, and so does another disciple. As this disciple is known to the high priest, he goes with Jesus into the courtyard while Peter stands outside the door. So the other disciple goes back out, speaks to the girl at the gate, and brings Peter inside.
The girl at the gate says to Peter, Aren't you also one of the disciples of that man? No, I am not, answers Peter. It is so cold that the servants build a charcoal fire and stand around it, warming themselves. So Peter goes over and stands with them, warming himself.
While they are inside, the high priest questions Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answers, "I have always spoken publicly to everyone. All my teaching is done in the synagogue and in the temple, where all the people come together."
Peter is still standing outside, keeping himself warm. One of the others says to him, "Aren't you also a disciple of this man?" But Peter denies it. "No, I am not," he says. Another of the high priest's slaves, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, speaks up. "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" he asks. Again, Peter says, "No." And at once, a rooster crows.
Early in the morning, Jesus is taken from Caiaphas' house to the governor's palace. Then Pilatus says to them, "I cannot find any reason to condemn him, but according to the custom you have, I always set free a prisoner for you during the Passover. Do you want me to set free for you the King of the Jews?"
They answer him with a shout, "No, not him. We want Barabbas." Then Pilate takes Jesus and has him whipped. The soldiers make a crown out of thorn branches and put it on his head. Then they put a purple robe on him and come to him and say, "Long live the King of the Jews." And they go up and slap him.
Pilate goes back out once more and says to the crowd, "Look, I will bring him out here to you to let you see that I cannot find any reason to condemn him." So Jesus comes out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. When the chief priest and the temple guards see him, they shout, "Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him!"
Pilate says to them, "You take him then and crucify him. I find no reason to condemn him."
As they lead him away, they seize Simon from Cyrene, who is on his way in from the country, and put a cross on him and make him carry it behind Jesus. A large number of people follow him, including women who mourn and wail. Jesus turns to them and says, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children."
2 other men, both criminals, are also led out to be with him to be executed. When they come to the place called the Skull, there they crucify him along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." And they divide up his clothes by casting lots.
The people stand watching. Even the rulers sneer at him. They say, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also come up and mock him. They offer him wine vinegar and say, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." One of the criminals hurls insults at him. "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us."
But the other criminal rebukes him. "Don't you fear God," he says, "since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answers him, "I will tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise."
It is now about the 6th hour, and darkness comes over the whole land until the 9th hour, for the sun stops shining. And the curtain of the temple is torn in two. Jesus calls out with a loud voice, "God, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he has said this, he breathes his last. Joseph unfolds a linen cloth and lays it on the ground. It is close woven and white, a little longer than a human frame and twice as wide. It is a shroud. Joseph leans a ladder on the far side of the cross. He climbs it. He draws ropes around the chest, beneath the shoulders of our Lord. He throws the loose ends to his servants. With force and sorrow that there must be force, he wrenches the spikes from the crossbar.
The body slumps forward against the ropes. Joseph descends and stands below the body. "Lower him," he whispers. By sad degrees, the body of the Lord sinks down to Joseph, who receives the torso in his right arm. The head falls back. Jesus is so light. The body without the sounding breath is pitifully light and little.
Joseph kneels and lays him on the shroud and begins to wind him for his burial. Somewhere a woman sighs once, just once. Who is that? The door to the tomb is a hole in stone no higher than a human waist. Joseph goes in backward on his knees, bearing the shoulders of Jesus. A servant keeps the legs from dragging in the dirt. "Thank you. It is enough," says Joseph, his voice enormous because of the rock around him. He disposes of the body alone and then emerges. There is a descending groove from the left to the front of the door. Joseph rolls a flat stone down this groove. The door is closed. The deed is done.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble,